What's up, guys? This is CJ, aka The Wolf, coming to you here from the Wolf's Cave. Before I go right into that, I might end up changing my name. Might end up changing my nickname back, just for just for personal reasons. But not gonna go into too much of it. This is not what I'm here for. You see what I got on, and you see what's behind me. Yeah, Oklahoma went into Tuscaloosa, handled their business, and came out alive. That was that was honestly a defining moment for Oklahoma's season. And we're not talking about, making a postseason run or, trying to make the college football playoff or trying to put themselves in position for an SEC championship, which that's not going to happen. But I felt like this was the game they really had to prove themselves to see if they do deserve to be in the SEC. I felt like last year, I just didn't think we were there. We beat Oklahoma just in our SEC season debut and just having to outplay them because of the defense doing the work without having to do much and Alabama not even scoring a touchdown. Like that was a big deal for us. I can't even call it a fluke. I just felt like the defense outplayed Alabama pretty much. Coming into this game, I was not too sure, but they did it again. And after that win, being in Tuscaloosa, I feel like we are officially an SEC team now. I think we've earned it. I think we deserve it. So it feels awesome. For anybody that listened to my podcast last time, I talked a little bit about my history with me and my dad when it came to me being an Oklahoma fan, him being an Alabama fan, me being emotional and everything for it. But this was a huge deal. This was a big deal. And I did kind of talk trash a little bit, but after 2 decades of hearing their bullshit, it was time to clap back in. You know, I'll explain it later on when I get to the Oklahoma Alabama matchup. But yeah, it was honestly a great weekend of football. Seeing Oklahoma win, Nevada finally ending their losing streak and beating San Jose State and partying in the tailgate because I don't know what happened with it, but apparently there was like a ban or restriction or limitation. Fans and alumnus and current students weren't having it. They wanted to do a petition. They felt like, the season hasn't been good. They at the tailgate to live by, it worked for them. And then seeing that taken away from them, they weren't happy about it. But they got it back before the game and after that big win. They felt so happy about it. So much crap happened after that game. I saw it through Instagram and stuff. I don't really want to go into too much of that. But yeah, and seeing Texas lose, that made the weekend of college football so perfect. I had such a happy weekend. Didn't appreciate that I went into work with how all of that happened. But again, I don't know. And it's just me personally. Like every time I see my team succeed in something big, I go into work on Monday. They just ruin it. So I feel like I think next season I will have to consider taking a day off. So then nobody ruins my vibe of a win like that. I did that when OKC won the championship. I took a day off to celebrate for my own self. So, but yeah, it was definitely a fun time. I had a good time. Um, and the 49ers also bounced back with the win. Brock Purdy came out cooked as well too. I was so happy with that. But we're past this weekend now. We're getting some ideas of how things will work out when it gets to postseason, but we have 2 weeks to go. And in this type of moment, we have cupcake. We have this weekend being the cupcake weekend, with a little bit of a couple of trap games to be played, including Oklahoma in this situation. And then next week is rivalry week. I cannot wait to talk about that. That is one of my favorite weeks of the entire season, being the last week with so much on the line, with teams trying to fight for a bowl, with other teams having nothing to lose and want to upset big time teams. And big time teams had a lot of pressure just to be able to finish up undefeated or just getting through the season. and just getting to the SEC or ACC or Big 10 or Big 12 or any type of conference championship, or just waiting it out and seeing what happens with the result. One conference, it's going to have an interesting situation of it, but let's get right into it. We will go into the games that I watched over this week, and I won't go into too much of a description of it. I really wanted to do it yesterday on Tuesday, but a lot of stuff came up at work, and I was just too exhausted to go through it. And not only that, the CFP rankings came out like around 5:30 or so, and I was still a little bit tired over the day, so I didn't feel like I wanted to do it anyway. So you see it right there. I'll talk a little bit about it if I can remember to get to it. So the games that I've watched, Mac games were awesome. The Mac games were good, so I can say that it's going to be a weekly type of thing. Next week on a Tuesday will, I believe, be the last day of Mac weekdays, and then the remaining Mac games will be on the weekend of next week. So on the Friday games, Louisville upset it. I mean, Clemson upset of Louisville. I don't really know if I can consider it an upset, but I can say typically a little bit of an upset because Louisville was kind of living on the edge, just trying to get themselves to an ACC championship. Unfortunately, they lost. They may have played themselves out because you got Georgia Tech, you got Virginia, and you got Miami battling for that spot. Minnesota, Oregon didn't really pay too much attention to it because I felt like Oregon was going to stomp Minnesota and follow through as should. So Oregon at home, Minnesota on the road. You get the idea. On the Saturday games, Northwestern, Michigan. That one was an interesting game. I watched some of it. It looked like Northwestern had a chance to beat them. I mean, even the coach said it the post game that their mindset was trying to win the game, try to go for a Big Ten title, even though that was like a long shot, possibly not going to happen anyway. But I did love the mindset that Northwestern's coach had compared to the Pitt's coach. But we'll get to that in just a minute. But yeah, this was something Michigan really needed to kind of stay up on being on the road. I felt like this was a trap game, but they managed to get away, escape, and keep their postseason hopes alive, knowing for the fact they have Ohio State bearing down on them in 2 weeks. Notre Dame and Pitt. I have no idea what Coach Narduzzi thought when he says, "Oh, we don't give a shit about the Notre Dame game. We might get our ass beat by 1,000 points. All we care about is winning the ACC." Well, guess what? Your unfortunate wish came true. You got your ass beat from the beginning. Big run by Jeremiah Love for the first touchdown, and then a turnover for a follow-up touchdown. And we saw how the domino effects played. Didn't like the fact that the coach had that mindset going into because you do not want to put that in your players' heads. Like, is that really what you're gonna go into this game? We don't really give a shit about Notre Dame. We care about the ACC championship and just winning out to try to get there. Okay, yeah, whatever. They got 2 weeks to try to make up for it, and I believe they have Miami in the last week of the season. I really have hopes that they could beat Miami, but Narduzzi needs to have a better mindset for these players. You do not want to set that type of example. That's BS in my opinion. Arizona, Cincinnati. I figured this was a trap game for Cincinnati. You know, they're desperate to try to get themselves into the Big 12 championship in their first actually successful season, which they have actually done. But Arizona outplayed them, underrated, not talked about, only 3 losses. They've actually played pretty well. I think except 1 or 2 games to where they didn't do so well. Almost had a chance of being BYU in one of those 3 losses, but I felt like they were a solid team. They got Noah Fafita, QB, who's a pretty good QB, bounced back from last season after a struggle, and came out with a huge victory against Cincinnati, which is a big deal. So I'm happy for him. I'm happy for the Wildcats. In about 2 weeks as well, they have Arizona State. So this is going to be an interesting ending to see who actually comes out on top in the desert. Wisconsin, Indiana. First half, it looked like we were going to be in another thriller. Going into halftime, whatever Kurt Signetti said to his players seemed motivating, seemed more upbeat because once they came out of halftime, as beat bonanza for them against Wisconsin. Fernando Mendoza explained it as well too. He talked highly about Kurt Signetti and how when he went into the transfer portal, he was looking around for schools, and then Kurt pretty much influenced him to come to Indiana, knowing for the fact he's going to get the best out of Fernando Mendoza. I'm really happy for Fernando. I watched him last season in person at Cal, and I thought he was a good quarterback with the potential of being great and could be an NFL player. Well, guess what? Kurt unlocked him, and can't wait to see where he ends up in the draft. If I think he leaves after this season. So whatever happens with it, I'm looking forward to it. And depending on what happens next year, might be a chance I might see him in person. We move on. Iowa USC, figured it would be what it was. Kind of an ugly matchup, close one. Felt like Iowa had a chance to get in USC, but USC was able to pull it out and win the game. It was a close one. It could have gone either way, honestly, but it felt like USC really needed this. They had, like Oklahoma, they really had to prove themselves that they do belong in the Big Ten. Beating Iowa in just that fashion, the way they did at the end, they have shown that they can probably tussle with the Big Ten competition with how athletic their offense is, but what they can bring to the table, they're trying to be a bit more physical, and they're showing some grit, they're showing some fight, they're showing some scrappiness. They have Oregon this weekend. Cannot wait to see it. I mean, who knows what can happen with that game? Some might say Oregon may have a chance, but they did lose to Indiana on game day at Oregon. So game day is going back to Oregon for that game, which kind of interesting. Game day is going to be down there again. When I heard about Montana State, why can't you just go there for that? Like, come on. Would have been nice to see somebody kick in, like, I don't know, 10-degree weather, if that's even possible for this weekend. But we move on to Miami and NC State. I really thought this was going to be a trap game, a close game. Like Indiana, Miami did not want any of it and just broke the doors down on them the moment NC State stepped into that stadium. There was no competition. I was a little disappointed in how that played out for NC State, but Miami, they know they have a couple of weeks ahead of them, knowing for the fact they're trying to get to the ACC championship and get themselves into the college football playoff. Virginia and Duke felt the same way, but let me see if let me see if it can pop up. I did not know who was going to start at quarterback for Virginia. If it was going to be Chandler Morris, yeah, it's going to be a runaway. If it was going to be the backup, probably a close game. I saw Morris on the field. I saw the score. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. God damn it. I wanted an ACC upset. But Chandler Morris is such a good QB when he's on the field. Like John Mateer gives this team a huge uplifting overall, and he showed it. And honestly, as much as I want to see some ACC chaos, I would honestly root for Virginia to get to the ACC title game, only because I love Chandler Morris, man. Just watching him at TCU in North Texas that one season, he's a good QB for dang sure, man. Utah and Baylor. So a little bit about that background. So, if anybody heard, Baylor's AD, who was the voice for the CFP committee, got let go because of some incidents that happened at Baylor. Actually, I think that past week, actually, if not last week. But not gonna go into too much detail about it. But he ended up getting replaced by the Utah AD, which is kind of ironic because Utah and Baylor were going to play each other this weekend. So I felt like the awkwardness was going to be there. And then, how would the Mormons feel just kind of looking at Baylor's AD, who I guess was on leave? I don't know if he was completely let go of Baylor. But yeah, just the awkwardness of it, what the Utah Mormons might think about him and the whole situation with Baylor. Like, why would you do that to your own players? That's just not right and everything, which is understandable. The tight end that Michael Triggs, I believe. Yeah, he was caught up in that incident. He didn't deserve to be caught up with that from that AD, and then whoever that coach was for him, just kind of treating him that way. Like that's just to me, that's just messed up. So yeah, but the awkwardness of it, just Utah AD replacing the Baylor AD, that makes it. I don't know. That's kind of weird just hearing it just right before that matchup. But yeah, Utah broke the freaking doors and took the brakes right out of Baylor. I mean, at this point, Utah's been beating the crap out of every team that they have played outside of Texas Tech and BYU. They're trying to get themselves into the field. I would love to see them in the field. I have them as one of my picks for the playoffs for sure next to BYU. It's going to be an interesting finish because at this point, Utah's trying to root for Texas Tech if BYU goes to the Big 12 championship to face Texas Tech. BYU has to lose twice for Utah to potentially get in the field. It's going to take a lot of convincing, though. But with how Utah has played, just wholeheartedly against all the opponents they're supposed to beat, they did a great job of it. But as far as a higher level of competition, that is a question to take if they can't beat Tech or beat BYU having the better stats than BYU has. But that's this point, it means absolutely nothing if you're talking Alabama, Oklahoma, which I'll get into in that moment. And then Utah State and UNLV. Utah State has improved. They gotten better. They got speaking of Utah player, former Utah QB, I can't remember his name. Let me check real quick. He's the pig farmer, as they call him for a nickname. Mm, yeah, if I can't find it, I'm not gonna take too much time. Okay, here we go. Let's see. For anybody watching, I am searching for his name. Bryson Barnes. Bryson Barnes, former Utah QB, nicknamed the Pig Farmer because he was a pig farmer. Uh went to overtime with UNLV. It looked like they had a chance of upsetting them and just ending UNLV's complete opportunity of trying to make it to the Mountain West Championship. Unfortunately, did not happen. Believe they kicked a field goal, and then UNLV just went right down and just scored. I really had high hopes for them beating UNLV because I'm a Nevada alumni and I'd rather not have UNLV be successful. So I think in 2 weeks we put Nevada plays UNLV. So we haven't had a good season, but if there's a team out there that we could feel so good about beating, it has to be UNLV. So we'll see what happens in a couple of weeks or so. USF and Navy. That game was interesting to me. I felt like Navy could actually beat USF. They beat them last year, but we weren't too sure how they would do this season. Navy is a good, solid team, but so is USF. They have really improved. And the fact that their quarterback has stayed healthy this entire season, unlike he did last season, that makes a huge difference for the team. But Navy outplayed USF. USF really tried to get themselves back into the game, which they eventually did, but Navy was able to come out like just with a close win. So that really opened the door for any AAC team that's remaining that's going to try to make the conference championship. As of right now, Navy is in position of going, but here's the very interesting scenario. Navy, I believe Navy has just Army left, and they don't play. Actually, let me see. Okay, so they play one more game this week, and then after that, they don't play another game until the Army Navy matchup, which is not until December 13th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, December 13th. Okay, okay. So they do have one more game next week against Memphis, and then they don't play another game until December 13th. So my opinion of this scenario is if they beat Memphis, they're in the conference championship, which means they will play a game the next week then. So they got a bye week this week, and then they got a game next week. If they win it, then they have the AAC title game. And if they win, I have no idea how this plays out because, you know, the committee wants the highest group of five team victory. For right now, as you see there, Tulane is the highest group of five team at this point. But if they somehow lose to Navy in the conference championship, I will assume Navy makes it to the college football playoff. But here's the one interesting thing if anybody knows anything about Navy Army Navy is a big deal. They got to play that game on 12/13. From what I last saw last year, they're not changing the schedule unless there's a huge reason for it. Otherwise, After the Memphis game, they make it. They're playing in the ACC championship, and then they're playing the Army Navy game the next week. And then after that, they play the college football playoffs. So this is where, depending on the situation for Navy, they're gonna have a very busy December, unlike other teams that has only the conference championship, and then after that they have about a week off or two before they play their playoff game if they're in the postseason for it. So I'm interested to see how things play out with Navy, but for right now they got a bye week. And then we'll see what happens with the scenario and how the CFP committee plays it. So then in the future, if Army's put in that position, at least Army understands, okay, we got this, we got that, and then we got the playoffs. All right, makes sense. South Carolina, Texas A&M. Holy crap. What in the fuck with this game? South Carolina got a 30-3 lead on them, but here is my thing about that. I posted it on Instagram just saying, "Oh my god, A&M is in huge trouble." Now, here was my thing about their first half. They made self-inflicted mistakes. The turnovers, the Marcel Reed throwing the ball behind, being pressured and everything. South Carolina just taking full advantage and just putting it down their throats with A&M's self-inflicted mistakes. And that key word is self-inflicting because it felt like A&M was just hurting themselves more than South Carolina doing a good job. I just did not see it. So when it got 30-3, my thought was A&M gets the ball in the second half. What is their situation? They have to score coming right out of half, and then they got to make a stop on their next possession, and then rinse and repeat. A&M pretty much did the exact thing they were supposed to. Whatever Coach Elko told them at halftime, I think he ripped right into them, and then just remind them what got us here. And that's exactly how A&M played. They got here because of what they were doing in the second half, and they scored 21 unanswered points in the third quarter. They took the lead in 20 game minutes of the second half. By the time they got to the fourth quarter, they took the lead and they held it down the rest of the way. South Carolina had absolutely no answer. I said this. If South Carolina gets at least one more point, whether it's a safety or a field goal, I don't know if A&M can come all the way back to win. And that here we go. That was the result, 31-30. South Carolina could have easily had one more point to just hold on and upset them for a chaotic upset. And it didn't happen. I've seen this before. And for all of you that remember the Falcons Patriots Super Bowl, that's exactly the scenario that I saw. Auburn, Florida State in the national championship. That's exactly the scenario that I saw. And that's what I saw in A&M. I thought A&M was the better team, but they made too many mistakes. But once they came out in the second half, every catch was coming through that did not happen in the first half. One of them, touchdown catch drop. Marcel Reed took care of the ball a bit better, but he had a couple of mistakes still happening, though, and that was my thing about him. I'm questioning him a little bit. He is proven to me he's a good QB, but I still have questions about his overall performance. But it took whatever it take for the team come back. Reed's pretty much the reason for that as well, too. But I mean, at that point, like A&M has proven they can adapt to pretty much any situation, and then in this deficit, they adapted to it. Now, if something like that does happen again when they play in the postseason, can they do it against the likes of Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas Tech, Ole Miss, Oregon, Oklahoma, Notre Dame? At this point, the teams I'm naming, like maybe even Alabama, maybe Utah, and Utah's got a good defense and they can run the ball down your throat and eat time as well too. Can they handle that? Those are the questions at this point going forward. Can A&M handle that? I did say they can adapt. Can they handle that against upper echelon teams? Memphis and ECU. ECU upset in Memphis, and this was the team I kind of looked out for because they can. This team can compete. This team can compete, and they got this QB named I think Allers, Horton Allers. I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to be that asshole to botch his name like that. So just give me a moment. If I can't find it on here, I will go through here. Okay, here we go. We found it. Let's see. I don't want to botch his name, but he is a good QB for Dankster actually. My bad. Horton Allers was the guy who used to play quarterback. I believe it's Caden Hauser. Caden Hauser. Good QB, honestly. He can throw the ball pretty dang well. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Kurt Benkert to an extent. I can't make the comparison of it, but this guy's a dog, man. He plays. He's a gunslinger, man. Like he's one of the reasons why ECU is pretty successful, and they thought he would actually be better this year, and it showed. I mean, they had chances in some games they could have won. I think they played, yeah, NC State as well too. Even though they did struggle, they did try coming back, but they came up short against them. But ECU is a good team. I felt like this team was going to lurk as much as North Texas was going to lurk. I felt like ECU was going to lurk, and they're continuing to lurk. I think they only have one conference. They have one conference loss. So with their schedule, I believe it. Oh no, they cleared it out. Okay. So with their schedule, they just got to win out and then see what happens. They got to be careful with UTSA. They're a scrappy dang team. They got a decent quarterback. um, happens to be the son of a former NFL quarterback who's actually been going to his games for a little bit. McCown, yes, McCown. His son is playing for UTSA, and they're not a bad team, but they really had an up and down season. But for ECU, they might come sneaking around. And if they play in the right position, they might find themselves in the AAC championship. But here is my thing about that, though. If they find themselves in the AAC championship with the highest group of five team that's trying to get themselves in the postseason and they beat them, this pretty much ends the AAC. There's no way ECU is going to go to the playoffs unless something happens with James Madison and anybody else that's higher. That's pretty much it at this point. I can't really think of another team that might be out there except maybe, I don't know, San Diego State, UNLV, anybody in the Mountain West, or if it gets that bad, would the MAC be put into this situation, or CUSA as well? But as of right now, just watch out for ECU. We'll see what happens. They might come up short, but let's not get too ahead of it. There's still 2 weeks left in the season. Then we go to Georgia Tech and BC. Now, some people might be surprised by the result, and that Georgia Tech almost lost to Boston College. I'm actually not. I took a look at their history matchups. Georgia Tech lost the last three to BC going into this matchup, so I knew this one was a trap game. If it wasn't going to be Virginia, if it wasn't going to be Virginia Duke or Miami NC State, I for sure was guaranteeing the Georgia Tech Boston College game was going to be a trap game, and it was. It looked like Boston College was going to just take them out altogether from the ACC and then give Miami, Virginia, anybody else a chance to get to the ACC title game. But Boston College just couldn't stop them. Georgia Tech, one of their athletes took the ball all the way down for a score, and that brought them back into getting an opportunity of upsetting them. And he's a pretty dang good athlete. But Georgia Tech was able to escape that game. Now it looks like they're in a better spot. They shouldn't have to have this issue until they get to Georgia, which should be an epic game. But if Georgia Tech does win their next game, I think they should be in the ACC title game because this will be their last ACC game before they play against their in-state rival. Florida Ole Miss. I didn't want to really think about it. I felt like this was a bit of a trap game for Ole Miss too. Now the only reason for it is the last time Ole Miss beat Florida was in 2008, and if anybody remembers, Tim Tebow's post-game speech after that loss to guarantee that they won't lose another game after that, and he followed suit. And then against my Oklahoma, 30 more minutes for the rest of their lives, or whatever that speech was, ended up winning the whole entire thing. That still is branded in my mind. I'm not happy about it. So I hope at some point Oklahoma plays Florida, and then we just shut them up after that. But going back to this, Florida had chances of upsetting Ole Miss, but then we all know who Florida was. They got shut out in the second half. Ole Miss was able to keep themselves alive, and they scored the last 14 to get themselves back in and win the game. At this point, I'm not really surprised, but I figured Florida was going to be scrappy with them for a little bit. But Ole Miss knows that they want to get themselves to the college football playoff, even without playing an SEC title game, which deep down they kind of hope they don't have to. They don't want to be affected by what happens with the result. But at the same time, they do have a chance. They do have a quality team. TCU BYU, I thought this one was going to be a trap game. No, it was not. TCU has given BYU a hard time in the past. Not this year. BYU pretty much just stomped the brakes off of TCU. Georgia, Texas. Again, I'm very happy with how Georgia played out. After Oklahoma won, I rooted wholeheartedly for the Bulldogs to take down Texas. If there's an SEC team out there that I do respect a little bit is Georgia because they are a good team. They are a scrappy team. They fight hard. They have that tradition. When I look at them at up to this point, even though they might not be the same team this year with all the players leaving for the NFL and a few leaving for the transfer portal, I felt like they're still an intimidating team until they play Alabama. Then they're really not. But they took care of business against Texas. The final score does not reflect how the game started out. It was a closer game than actually that some people expected. But I think once Kirby Smart realized what Arch Manning did when they scored, he wanted to do everything to make sure they don't get the ball back until they're very comfortable. It was a close game going into the fourth quarter. All of a sudden, Georgia scores, and then they do the onside kick. Kirby Smart, man, whatever he does, man, he digs in his bag. He digs in his bag of tricks. Thank God he's not in the NFL because we want to be able to see the same shit that we see in college football, which is why I love the game. But got the onside kick and then proceeded to score again, putting Texas out of reach. Known for the fact their offense ain't that good, they don't want to stay close with them. But at the same time, when it gets to the fourth quarter, Georgia is a fourth quarter team. They kept it close. They won. They dominated, and they pretty much put Texas out of reach, not only of that game and the SEC title game, but potentially the college football playoff. So they're down at number 17 right now. Thank you. We'll see what happens the rest of the season. I mean, at this point, they really have nothing to worry about this week. But next week, they host Texas A&M. Depending on what happens with A&M going into this, which I don't think is going to be a problem, this game is going to decide pretty much everything. As far as A&M's situation getting to the SEC championship and Texas trying to stay alive to get themselves into the college football playoff. I had a talk with one of my coworkers, and he told me at this point if Texas somehow beats A&M, they might be on the bubble to get in. But the same scenario goes for other teams, but it's just like at this point, that's the scenario. But their only hope is Oklahoma losing just to kind of help them because they did win the fucking head to head, you bastards. But other than that, if anything, Alabama's resume is better than Texas. They did beat Georgia. And not only that, you know, I think Ole Miss has a better resume than Texas. I don't know how that plays, but it comes down to Ole Miss losing to Mississippi State in 2 weeks. But this is where we see right now Texas is pretty much out of the college football playoff conversation, even though the conversation is still there because of their brand. Georgia is in a good position. They should be able to clear out this week's schedule to prepare for Georgia Tech, which to me is going to be an epic matchup. So can't wait for that one. And then we close things out with against you see that right there? Oh, I posted that one last year when Oklahoma beat them. I had absolutely no hope or or anything. Just please make it somewhat merciful. And I was really surprised with last year. And then this year, I'm like, I don't know how we're gonna do in Tuscaloosa, but Bama has not beaten Oklahoma in Tuscaloosa in history, which was one time back into the 1960s or 70s or whatever. And I don't know. I don't know how it's gonna go because we got an elite defense, but our offense hasn't really been that great. But it felt really good. You see the scythe behind me? Yeah. Made a deal to make sure that they are put down again, and yeah, we put them down. But I'm just gonna say this though. It feels good being Bama. Because after listening to them for 2 freaking decades saying that they're the hot shit and everything, my thought was, what would it be like if Oklahoma were to be in the SEC and you had to play us every season? Do you think you're actually going to beat us every time? The majority says yes. I didn't really see it that way. Oklahoma has been historically good. They have played historically, they have played well in big matchups historically, going back to Big Game Bob. And even before then, Oklahoma, I don't know what it is about this program, but they are able to adapt to good competition. And I think that first example was against Tennessee. That game was a prove it moment just to see if we can compete with tougher competition. And that was step one. And then following up against Tuscaloosa, that was definitely going to be one of the toughest environments to play in. But this was what caught me by surprise. Apparently, during the game on the bench, I don't know who was the announcer for it. I don't know if it was Molly Mack. I don't know if it was, yeah, I think it was Molly McGrath. I don't know if it was her or somebody else, but I feel like it was Molly McGrath. They were sitting on the sideline. John Mateer was asking his offensive line, is the noise worse than Tennessee? And when most of them shook their heads no, I was a little blown away because I understand how loud Tennessee's environment is, but the fact that Oklahoma's Oklahoma's players weren't affected by Tuscaloosa, that really surprised me. So at this point, it kind of gave me a little hope. Okay, maybe Oklahoma can make this interesting for Alabama. My only question was, how's the offense going to play? Because the run game wasn't that good with the offensive line being bad. John Mateer, even if he feels like his hand's not a bad situation now that he feels recovered, it has not been productive. But I did say this before. Alabama struggles against mobile quarterbacks. We have a mobile quarterback, and that worked out for Oklahoma really well. And at this point, he was the difference maker on that offense, along with everybody else being involved in it. They played quality football. They didn't turn over. Did they not turn over the ball? I don't remember them turning over the ball. All I know is Alabama turned over the ball 3 times. Special teams, interception, and a forced fumble. That's what I remember for sure. I don't think Oklahoma turned over the ball. They have not. And this is the same exact thing I saw last year. Alabama lost the turnover battle to Oklahoma. They lost the game, despite having the better stats than Oklahoma. Same thing happened with this game. They lost the game despite having better stats than Oklahoma, but they lost the turnover battle again. And looking at Alabama, they definitely do look one dimensional. However, though, one guy that was a pain in my ass, and I knew he was going to be a problem going into this one. His name, his name is Hill. His I'm gonna get the whole name. I'm looking. Daniel Hill, 6'1", 240. He reminds me of Derrick Henry, Trent Richardson, and maybe Josh Jacobs. I don't know how big he was. But hearing that size and then him playing the week before Oklahoma, I'm like, if there's one guy who's going to be a pain in my ass and a problem, it's going to be Daniel Hill. He got 60 yards for 2 touchdowns. I'm like, oh, this motherfucker. Of course, of all guys on the freaking offense, that guy's going to be a problem. I didn't really care much about Ty Simpson. I do respect him. I think he is a good quarterback. I think he's one of the best players for Alabama at this point that we all know of. That's why he was in the Heisman. But now you got to look at Daniel Hill because Jan Miller has not been consistent. We have no answer in the running back position. Hearing that 6'1", 240 for your running back, I think you need to run him just a bit more alongside Jan Miller because he's a difference maker, to be honest. Alabama has always been about a sizable running back who can run it down your throat and intimidate you in the trenches, which has been that way for 2 decades. Daniel Hill is one of those steps for Alabama to be better. If they can just find an answer with him, with the offensive line playing a little bit better in the trenches, be careful when they get into the postseason. They may make a huge step. So that is just one big thing they have to improve on. And I suggest using Daniel Hill a little bit more. So he's on my scouting report moving forward. All right. I ran through my stuff. I felt a little bit smoother than I did starting things out. But I will say this though, like I said, this week is cupcake week with trap games being played. And I'm looking at this schedule. I know for sure Oklahoma's going to be in that trap game with Missouri. It's going to be a tricky one. They're on their third QB, but he did have full time last week playing as a starter. So he may be a bit more comfortable. And it is a rivalry game as well, too. We do not know what's going to happen. Oklahoma beat Bama. They felt really good about themselves, but now they got to really get locked in, knowing for the fact they're 2 games away from being in the postseason, most likely, unless barring anything different. They should be in a good spot. And most importantly, Oklahoma has to play the Tigers in the last 2 weeks. So this is going to be interesting to see if they can cage them, net them, and neuter them after. Yeah, you heard me say it. Miami of Virginia Tech. I considered that one to be a trap game because Miami has a hard time closing things out in the last month of the season. They've done that 3 times before, or 2 times actually. It could be 3 times, who knows? But they did it the last 2 times, even with Cam Ward last year. It could happen again. As I said this before, I have no idea who Vatek is, but they did hire James Franklin. That's a huge motivation. They have recruits coming into town. That might add some motivation to it. And then of course, the Sandman, the pregame, the Sandman. How does that not get you juiced up to trying to take down one of the top teams trying to get into the postseason? This is something Miami has to be prepared for because if not, and they lose one more time, it's over. It's pretty much over for their opportunity unless Virginia and Georgia Tech somehow get blindsided as well too. Wazoo and James Madison. James Madison is in a good spot of trying to get themselves into the postseason as the highest group of 5. They have to win out and win the Sun Belt Championship to be in that spot. I don't want to go too much into this one. Ball State Toledo. Toledo's trying to win out and get in, but Ball State somehow is playing competitive football, which you don't hear all the time. It could go either way with this game. The MAC football has been good. You just don't know what's going to happen with this matchup. You don't know what's going to happen with any matchup. It's MAC football. That's what's so fun about it. This game is to watch out for, and this is going to be the game changer in how the rankings do go for next week. USC and Oregon. Had to talk with a coworker who is a big-time USC fan, and he feels like USC has a chance, but it's going to be a very tough one in Oregon. But here's the thing about Oregon being in this situation. As I said before, game day was in town when Indiana was in town. They lost to them. Game day's back in Oregon. They got USC. If they lose that game, Oregon's in trouble, and USC has a chance of getting into the postseason, which I do not want because if you see this, I hate Lincoln Riley. He's a backstabbing motherfucker, and I know some other fans out there know, including ECU fans that know a little bit about him. He's a backstabbing son of a bitch. And yeah, he might be at USC right now, but how do we know he's not going to be a backstabbing son of a bitch to them too? Which I would like to see, so then USC can know how we feel. But that's besides the point. We're ranked higher than USC. We just got to take care of our business. So I don't give a shit about them right now. But this is a big game for USC. They beat out Oregon. They can get themselves in line of trying to go to the college football playoff. Moving on from that one. There's Jacksonville State FIU. I don't know what to expect from that game. FIU went through a new quarterback, I guess for a big change. But Keon Owens, running back for FIU, keep an eye on him. He's a good running back. If he wanted to, he could have transferred anywhere. If I was at a college football school that I was coaching, I would try to get him over here to play. But he's a good running back. I hope he goes to the NFL Combine just to kind of show what he's capable of. Tulane and Temple. Tulane's the highest group of 5 team right now, but I would be very careful. Temple has kind of gotten better this year. They're competitive. They got a good quarterback. It seems like the entire team is playing competitive football just to see how well they can do. They had a couple of opportunities to actually upsetting teams, including Navy. So anything can happen with that game, and they're at home, so that works out for them. Michigan and Maryland. Don't want to make too much of Maryland, but they do have a they do have a QB who has a lot of potential, named Malik Washington, freshman right now, like Michigan with their quarterback Bryce Underwood. We'll see how that plays out. Can Michigan lock in and actually play better, known for the fact they have Ohio State? TCU in Houston. I thought there was a lot to play for that game, but now it's not too much. Houston's back in the top 25, and anything could happen with them. But if I were Houston, if they're in this situation, they have to lock in because TCU is a very good competitive team. And with Hoover as their quarterback, you can't underestimate this team. There's Pitt and Georgia Tech. Now that Pitt's focused on the ACC, they really have to lock in now. If they want to go to the conference championship, Georgia Tech is the first team to go through. In their last 2 weeks, they have them and they have Miami. If there is a shot for them to get into the ACC title game, and Narduzzi can keep his word for it, beat Georgia Tech and beat Miami to prove yourselves. If not, and you lose those last 2 games, you are going to get so much heat thrown back at you by Pitt fans for what you said for your comments. And the analyst that pays attention to it, oh, they'll say the same exact thing as well too. North Texas and Rice. North Texas is trying to get themselves into the AAC title game. They look better this year. I love Drew Mestamaker. I talked good about him, highly about him. My posts show it as well too. They just got to be careful with Rice because Rice is trying to get themselves. No, they're not. No, I thought they were trying to get themselves to a bowl game. No, but Rice is a team you should not underestimate. Known for the fact you're on the road and you're an in-state rival with them as well too. BYU and Cincinnati. Cincinnati is knocked out, but it doesn't mean they won't try and upset BYU. Let's see how BYU responds on the road, known for the fact they're in a great spot of trying to get themselves into the Big 12 championship. I know Utah is a big fan of Cincinnati right now, but BYU really has to lock in if they want to get themselves through because they got UCF at the end of the season at home. So it shouldn't be bad, which is why they really have to take care of business against Cincinnati and prove themselves they do have a second chance against Texas Tech. And then there's Arizona State, Colorado. Arizona State found themselves back into the top 25, I think, for the third time this season. Honestly, I don't know what's going to happen with this game. They're away from home. At this point, Colorado has absolutely nothing to lose. They're trying to figure out their quarterback situation. So, depending on how that plays out with it, I think Arizona State should not overlook them, knowing for the fact they do have a good Arizona team they got to deal with next week. And then there's Utah State and Fresno State. Fresno State is trying to get themselves to the Mountain West Championship. I think Utah State's out of that conversation for it, but it doesn't mean they won't do like they did against the UNLV last week. Try to upset them. All right. That's it. I'm done. I would have liked to talk about the scenarios of this, but I'm not going to go too much into it. But I do want to speak up on the rankings that just came out. Give me a moment. Let me get my water. Let me get my water. So, looking at these rankings, I'm totally fine with it. I think there was one team that I think I had. I'm trying to think who it was. I thought I had it flipped, but somehow Texas Tech climbed up a little bit more than I thought. I thought Ole Miss was going to be at 5, but Texas Tech happened to be at 5. But other than that, I'm fine with it. I have absolutely no problem with the rankings. I really thought SMU would have been in the field because they still have, if I'm not mistaken, I still think they only have one loss in the ACC. Excuse me for one moment. For again, if anybody is watching, I am looking up for SMU. For those not watching, yeah, see, they only have one conference loss. They don't really have much to play for. But yeah, let me throw that back in. But they did beat Miami. So they have a win off of that. I would have thought they would have been in the field of top 25 because of that win. Just knowing for the fact they have an opportunity. But since they're not, they still do. They might get into the top 25 next week, depending on what happens with this weekend. And with them with a one loss, they have to hope Pitt loses. They have to hope Virginia loses. They have to hope Georgia Tech loses. At least one of them. They have to hope at least one of them lose. Because as of right now, Georgia Tech and Virginia hold up that spot. And if they end up losing, and so does Pitt, SMU finds themselves in the conference championship. What's weird about the ACC setup in the rankings is the fact that Miami's higher than Miami's higher than all the ACC teams as of right now. And yet, you're looking at here, they have two conference losses, and they're even below two teams that are not even in the top 25, which makes absolutely no sense. So I want to say why give Miami that much of a benefit? It's because they got to win. What they got to win off of Notre Dame. So I guess that's one benefit. But uh, I don't know, man. I I feel like this kind of confuses me a little bit. This confuses me a little bit with them being that high up, knowing for the fact they're not playing in the conference championship. So at this point, what does happen if they're not in the conference championship? And then somehow Virginia and Georgia Tech lose. Somehow Pitt. You know what? I think I pretty much answered my own question because I said Pitt. Okay. Okay, we're good. We're good. But if at least one of them above Miami loses and then Pitt loses again, okay, I can understand that. But I'm still confused on the ACC situation, which is why it was just such a chaotic season for them. So we'll see what happens this weekend. Again, Miami's in a situation where they could lose the one of the last two games, which could really hurt them. And then Virginia and Georgia Tech, they may be in a great spot for it, but they're not they're not big time experienced enough to be in these situations like these top 10, top 11 teams that we see here. So this is going to be an interesting ending for the ACC teams just in general. Um, I feel like when I'm looking at here, the the AAC is still trying to figure themselves out. They're a revolving door of trying to figure things out. ACC doing the same exact thing in a chaotic way. Big Ten, I think we have everything figured out. Indiana and Ohio State are going to play each other in the conference championship. For COSA, which nobody cares about, Jack stays in a good spot. They might be in a trap game against FIU, but then there's West Kentucky, and then you have the two newcomers, Kennesaw State. Well, not Kennesaw State, they were there last year. But then you have second year Kennesaw State and newcomer Missouri State trying to get themselves into the CUSA Conference Championship. Then you have Notre Dame that just needs to win out. Then you have the MAC that's trying to figure themselves out a little bit, but I think they're coming to a close on who might go to the conference championship. Mount West is a little bit open. San Diego State still has an opportunity of getting themselves in. Fresno State could be the follow up of it as well too, but you have Boise State, New Mexico of all teams, UNLV and Hawaii kind of lurking a little bit. Then you have the SEC that pretty much kind of cleared out the smoke a little bit. Now you're looking at A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss that still might be in that position of getting to the conference championship. Ole Miss can't really do much more to get themselves in. Now they just got to hope that now they just got to hope that Texas A&M and Alabama loses their last game of the season against Texas and Auburn. But, we'll see what happens with it. And then there's a Sun Belt that already has James Madison in the conference championship, but they want to put themselves in a great spot to go into the college football playoff as the highest group of five team. I believe if Tulane loses, that puts themselves in a great spot for it. And then you got the Big 12, which I kind of skipped over everything for that one. We already know Texas Tech is very likely in. And then you have BYU, Utah trying to fight for a spot. Houston, Arizona State, and Cincinnati really hope that they can get their wins and put themselves in a better spot for it. But the last 2 weeks of this the last 2 weeks of this season is honestly gonna be a great it's gonna be a great finish. I can't wait for it. I really can't wait for it. I really loved how college football has looked these past 2 seasons since the 12-team playoffs came in. It motivates so many more teams that feel like they do not have a chance to actually have a chance of getting in, including Oklahoma, which I'm really honestly happy about. But my expectations is an 8-win season. Already got that. But again, anything can happen. This weekend's a cupcake weekend. Then there's trap games in the middle of the whole thing, and then next week is rivalry week. So pretty excited about that. Looking forward to it. All right, I'm done with everything. I really wanted to talk about a little bit with the NFL, but I'm not going to go really too much into it. I mean, if you want to see some of my NFL stuff, go to all lowercase lonewolf1225.com. You'll see all my power rankings of the NFL and information on it. After this weekend, I'm going to put out another power rankings for the NFL, and most importantly, a post to see where we're at after week 12 with about 6 to 7 weeks of football to go. We kind of have an idea who might be in a good spot for the NFL postseason. Others were still trying to figure things out, but otherwise, it's been an unpredictable, a weekly unpredictable situation for all, let's say, 20 teams, 24 teams at most, I guess. It's been a weird season of everything, but the Patriots, man. The Patriots really have climbed up. I recommend you guys checking out my NFL power rankings from this week, lonewolf1225.com. You'll see where I put the Patriots at. And some of you guys might be surprised, others might not be. I have a fellow Patriot fan who used to be my high school teacher who's really happy about their run, but at the same time, he's like, I don't know if I can really trust them. But they do have a semi tough schedule going down, which is why I'm going to talk about that in my next posting. And believe it or not, I might talk about maybe the NFL on one of the days. I might make this a 2-day thing, one for college football, the other one for the NFL. Like, again, next week's going to be a huge week. And this is something I'm really looking forward to. So right now I've done 9 episodes. I'm hoping I can make it to 10. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do tonight because of a lot of stuff happening at work. I felt tired. I felt a little bit stressed out, but I was able to get myself recuperated, relocked in, had myself something to eat, had a little bit of soda, um, watch some Yu-Gi-Oh if anybody knows anything about it, and just played a game or two, and it got my energy back just to be able to do this. So I'm gonna keep that in mind just to kind of like get myself juiced up, do something like this. But thank you guys for listening, watching, even if it was like for a minute or so and just moving on or skimming through this whole thing. If you're very much smart and capable enough for it, I do appreciate it. I love talking football. I love watching football. I live for this. I go to those games. So yeah, looking forward to doing this next week and yeah, see where we're all at with our favorite teams. So yeah, peace out guys. Have a good day, morning, night, wherever the hell you are, whatever time you're listening to or watching it. Deuces. Oh, Boomer Sooner, tide rolled over.